morning, everybody. Welcome to Bolivia Political Crossroads. Today is January 16th, 2021. Today's program is in English, number 48. Good morning, Ernesto. How are you doing over there?
Pretty good, yes. The climate is fine, and everything is fine. I'm doing also good, yeah. How are you doing?
I'm good. I feel like I'm at home. It's like we have Seattle weather today. It's drizzly and kind of cool, so I'll take it. As long as we don't get floods. So yeah, good man. In general, you know, I try to be an optimist, but boy, things are a little messy right now. We were talking before we started recording about the issues, the hot topics, and definitely we're back in a situation where COVID seems to be dominating the news, and it's probably everybody's first concern in terms of you know what's on people's minds. The elections, or the local elections, or whatever you want to call them, the subnacionales, or mayoral and gubernatorial, that are supposed to be in March. We still don't know if those are going to be postponed or not. There's a few issues there with that are probably worth touching on at some point with the candidates here in Santa Cruz for mayor. But in general, again, it's the COVID situation. We've got higher numbers than we've ever had before. We're at about 2,600 for yesterday, more than 1,000 in Santa Cruz. It seems everybody's catching it that didn't catch it before. Luis Arce's cabinet has 3 or 4 ministers at this point.
Gee, that's
that have got it. The health minister, Pozo, he resigned. He's got it. He's an older gentleman, so he's probably concerned and wants to take as good a care of himself, as good a care of himself as he can. That's a little bit of a tongue twister, sorry. But and yeah, stress. Being the health minister when you're in a COVID crisis is not going to be good for your stress levels. And if you're over 70, and yeah, I get it. I would resign too. We've got Evo Morales. I'm going to tell people about this who aren't up to speed. And we talk about how much Evo Morales and Donald Trump seem to have very similar personality types. So right. I think this was on Monday or Tuesday. No, maybe it was Wednesday. I believe it was Wednesday of this week. In the morning, it was in the headlines that, and there were rumors from the night before that Evo had COVID. He'd taken the test, but it hadn't been confirmed yet. And in the morning, there was headlines saying that he was blaming the right for these terrible rumors that he had COVID, that it was just a cough. And the day before, he was in a big mass meeting with hundreds of people. He's sitting at the table on the stage surrounded by other, speakers or mass leaders or whatever you call them. No mask, and maybe 4 or 5 in the afternoon, new headlines appear that yes, Evo has COVID. It's confirmed. He's admitted into a private clinic in Cochabamba, and so take from that what you will. But
it's pretty sad, really. I mean, yes, I understand that it can even be interesting to comment on him. Well, it is. We're commenting on what he does, but it's pretty sad, really. Because he's an adult. He's not a little kid. He's not like a 15-year-old guy. He's an old man, and the guy is just as if he wouldn't understand the basics of this whole thing. The fact that he doesn't wear a mask is automatically converts him almost an assassin. I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not really too much, because if you get the virus and you don't have a mask, you're going to kill somebody. The probability that you kill somebody is very high, because it depends who contracts the virus from you. But if it's somebody that is either older or has diabetes
underlying condition.
Yeah, well, this would be very bad. The person can die, actually. So he's not worried about that. And that worries me, because he's the main leader in this country. He's the most influential person in Bolivia. And the most influential person in Bolivia is just willing to not wear a mask and kill people, and insists on doing such thing, which is just, it's out of my mind. I cannot understand that, I don't think Trump would get this bad, I don't know. They're comparable. I admit that, it's just
He
a matter
was. He, he was, man.
of,
He was
they're
before he contracted it. He wasn't wearing a mask at at various functions where he was around. I mean, he's the president. He's gonna have people around him all the time.
Yep. No,
Well, I'm talking about Trump, not Abel. Thankfully, Abel's
yeah,
not.
but these guys are just, Siamese brothers, they're idiots, they cannot do that, and I don't know when these guys will understand that exactly. They're almost assassins at doing that. But Evo's doing that. He's insisting on his position, and he has put a trap on the government, which is the worst, because there's almost it's, well, I don't know if it's so indirect. There's almost a direct order on the government that there's no lockup. People have to go out and work. Which from the beginning I was always on that position, because I always thought people had to work and not be locked down.
Mhm.
But the point is that things change, I think, in life, and even Mr. Johnson from the UK has changed, because conditions change. And what I'm seeing right now in Bolivia is just I don't know how workable it would be. I would agree, and it's good to have this discussion. For example, in my experience, which is the only thing that I know for real, my experience is I go to court almost every day. I have to go to court, and it's just a situation in which it's not manageable, because the people in court in Santa Cruz, at least, they have set up rules, but they're absolutely nothing, or at least they're not important for us, for the people, for the public, for the general public.
Yeah, and they're not being followed, right? Looks like we just lost Ernesto for a minute there.
Yeah, the protection rules are not made for the public, for the general public. The protection rules are made for the judge and for the people that work with him within the perimeter of his office, not in the corridors, which is where most people are, which is pretty bad to begin with. But now what's happening is that
they're using they're using the elevators there.
They're using the elevator. Yes, exactly.
For those of you who don't know, the elevators here, there's one or two.
There's two elevators.
There's two elevators. They're tiny elevators. They're not big elevators.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Tiny.
And they pack you in there like cattle.
Mm-hmm.
And dude, I don't want to think about that. And then they're stopping at like every other floor, right? And there's so you're in there for a couple minutes if you're going up to one of the top. There's 18 stories.
The point, it's a good point you're touching this, because there are people that don't have any other alternative, because
that's crazy.
Either they're old people or they're sick or whatever, and they just can't go up the stairs.
Right.
In my case, I never take the elevator. This is since March last year. I just walk up the stairs, which is a good exercise. But people are riding those elevators, and the elevators, as you mentioned, they're very dangerous to begin with. Mm-hmm. The corridors, that's where things take place, in the corridors, because you have like windows in every juzgado. So when you approach the juzgado, people make a line. Mm-hmm. Of course, people are not separated.
But social distancing here doesn't.
There is no such thing as social distancing. So that's point number one. Point number two is you get a book there, because you have to revise. There's a daily record of things that happened in the juzgado. So you have to get this book, which everybody touches it. Everybody has to touch that. So you have to touch it too, and so on and so forth. So what's the result of that? Of course, the result of that is that many people are picking it up, the virus. Mm-hmm. But now even the guys that made the rules for themselves are picking it. Even the judges and the people that work with them are getting the virus. So last time I went, this past week, I went to the same place twice, to this same corridor. The corridor is almost closed completely, because most of the juzgados are closed now. And
because
they
they're
put this big signs and say this juzgado is closed because we have the coronavirus. So it's a trembling situation. It's appalling. Everybody, if you walk through there, it's just like a movie, like a terror movie. The point is, the government is not going to close all these places where people work, but there's also no solution to this.
no.
I would be fine if everybody would go to work, but then make the rules that prevent people from becoming sick with coronavirus, and they're not doing that. It's not just the fact to say, oh, we need to recover the economy and it has to work, so please go out and work. And no, because that's not enough. And people, for some reason, voluntarily do not comply with the rules. And not only social distancing, people don't wear the mask. I don't know if you've seen last night. I've watched the program on TV last night, and you had two parties, and the parties are called asymptomatic parties.
Okay.
Come to the asymptomatic party and drink. And people do go to these massive parties. In Santa Cruz was one of them, and the other one was in Cochabamba.
What?
And
Asymptomatic. So like people who have tested positive but are asymptomatic all get together?
Well, I don't know if they took the test, but they're probably, most of those guys feel they're asymptomatic, and they go there and they celebrate because they're asymptomatic, which is another expression of, I don't care about people's lives. Not even my life to begin with, because like you say, they should all be tested in order to get into the party. I imagine they're not tested, they just go there. But the fact that people would think, that would cross their minds to organize a party of people that are asymptomatic is just terrorist. It's a terrorist idea, and they've had that in Santa Cruz. They have one in Cochabamba. Police went in, they took these guys to the police and whatever. But that's the level of people's consciousness in this whole problem. Many of the young people are careless about this because they don't care about
not just young people.
Yep, they don't care about anything. They don't care about the other person.
I'll tell you a story when we're not recording that I forgot to tell you. Sorry to keep everybody else in suspense, but I'm not. I don't want anybody to go to jail because of me.
So the whole point is that, yes, it's important that people work. Yes, it's important that people have income, but the government, the state, cannot be oblivious about the rules and on everyday life. The state has something to do about this. I know that laissez-faire is very good, and that people should do whatever they in their consciousness feel is good and bad. But sometimes people need more than that. The state needs to have a stronger hold of things, especially where populations are like in Santa Cruz or in La Paz. A large number of people are uneducated. They don't have access to all the information about COVID, and plus, they have had during the last year, or at least from March on, they've had all this political discourse whereby, oh, there's no COVID, we are free from COVID, or we are the chosen people in the world because we eat chuño and we don't get COVID. So it's a whole mixture of information that you get into people's heads, and you finally don't know what the result is. But the result clearly is that they go out to the streets without wearing a mask. They don't respect the social distancing, and they are dying every day, and they're making other people die without any consideration. So that's my issue. I'm not so much in the Yaninist position that people do not have to work, but also the state has to do something. Government has something to do here. Orient people, give them rules, and I don't know, have them comply.
I mentioned that last week, right? It would not. I think it became so politicized that Arce, and you've said this as well, it's hard for him to backtrack and say, oh, maybe I was wrong. Maybe Arce, I don't think, is the extremist. I think if you had I think he sits down with his wife and talks at night and he's like, shit, I don't know. I think he's a little more intelligent and reasonable, but the position he's in, he's between a rock and a hard place because he can't backtrack. He has to toe the party line, which is a shame. But what I was saying is that it wouldn't do them any damage to at least create a media campaign encouraging mask wearing and social distancing, washing your hands and how to wash your hands. People don't understand that washing your hands isn't just turning on the faucet for 3 seconds and running water over them. You have to use soap and scrub and blah, blah, blah for 20 seconds, sing happy birthday or whatever to know how long 20 seconds is. And they're doing any of that. They aren't doing it. They're going into, I saw this on Facebook, the health ministry, or the Ministry of Health, whatever you want to call it in English, is promoting natural remedies. Like, how do you make a smoothie with ginger and turmeric and papaya and I don't know what else, and they even screwed up. Like, one said it was supposed to, how do you make this ginger papaya smoothie, and it says the ingredients are squash and something else. Like, anyway, but I mean, okay, natural remedies, fine, you know, if you want to promote those, good, but also personal hygiene and things, you know, that whether you want to argue about the effectiveness or mask wearing or not, it doesn't hurt. And masks are already available. They're cheap. They're probably cheaper than making ginger and papaya smoothies. They're not doing any of this stuff. They're not, there's no campaign to enforce or to encourage the basic, I hate the word biosecurity. I don't know why I don't like that word, biosecurity measures, and much less enforce them, right? I don't know why they're just not doing anything. Although I saw a headline this morning, I didn't look at it too much, but he says there's like 20 new measures to try to combat the second wave. A couple of which seem like they make sense, right? Well, at least one of them, the SEHIP, which is the offices where you get your ID or your driver's license. They've decided, thankfully, they've come to their senses and decided that everybody who has an expired license or ID card can use them until, I think, March 31st. So they're avoiding people being in these huge lines and being in enclosed spaces for long periods of time by not obligating people with expired licenses and ID cards to go to those offices. Good for them. That makes sense. But it took them long enough to do that, you know? Yeah. I mean, it's been about a month now since we've been seeing the case numbers starting to rise rapidly. They've imposed an horario continuo, or I don't know how you call this. And we have the siesta here in Bolivia, so people have a 3-hour lunch break, and now they're saying, oh, people can work. They're basically staggering work hours so people don't all have to come in or go out at the same time. I don't know how much that does for everybody, but you know, there's a lot of things they could do. Going back to the lockdown and what you're saying, the reality of this country is we can't stand a lockdown politically. And what this also drives me insane with Arce, you know, I try to give the guy the benefit of the doubt and give him a chance, but he loves to, you know, rag on Janine Áñez and say all these things that, you know, according to Arce, they didn't do anything to get the vacuna or the vaccine. The vaccine didn't exist yet until December, basically. And that's all been disproven as well. But here's the thing. Janine Áñez didn't just do perhaps the population a favor, or the medical community a favor by slowing down, flattening the curve, or whatever you want to call it, by imposing a lockdown. She also did Luis Arce a huge favor because the lockdown drove our economy into the ground. And so Arce doesn't have to do anything. No matter what happens, as long as he doesn't do another lockdown, we're going to have positive numbers in economic growth, right? Right. Which, that's what and so he knows this, I'm sure. And so he doesn't have to do anything, you know, as long as there's another lockdown, the numbers are going to go up, because after basically what was let's see, March, April, May, June, July, a 5-month lockdown, and then with the heavy restrictions between July, August, and September, the economy, I don't know what the final numbers were, but it was like a negative 7% or something like that. So he doesn't have to do anything. If he does impose a lockdown, besides starving people, because we know it doesn't work, he's going to have the numbers go back down. And the last thing he wants is to have negative GDP growth. You know, he's the what do you call it, the messias, or the you know, he's the economic expert, and that's one of the reasons they chose him as a candidate, his party. So that's not going to happen. I don't think it should happen either. I agree with you, but there's so many little things that could be done to at least, you know, make it look like they care, you know, and want to do something.
But the basic thing they have to do, I think, I don't know if you agree with that, is that allow people to rectify your original position. The mass, including him, including Luis Arce, you know, was sustaining the thesis that there was no COVID. And the reason I mentioned this and I insist on this is because I think I mentioned it to you. I have a friend with whom I work, and he lives in El Alto. I speak to him at least once every week. I spoke to him like 2 or 3 days ago, and I asked him how people are faring in El Alto, whether they're wearing or not. He told me basically this. He said, in the city of La Paz, 90% of the people wear masks, 10% don't. In El Alto, it's exactly the
opposite.
Yes, 10% of the people wear masks, 90% don't wear masks. What can you expect out of that? You know, what can you expect? Why do people don't wear masks? Basically because they sustain that there's no such thing as COVID, that this is a whole conspiracy theory from the right, which wants to, I don't know what their theory is, but basically there is no COVID. In this, okay. So basically, you know, if these guys change their policy and their discourse in terms of admitting that there is COVID and that people should take care, from then on things could get better. But while they don't do that, people have in their minds, especially their followers, and the followers that are from El Alto and El Altiplano, people are not well educated, and they accept whatever Evo Morales says as it was the ultimate truth. And well, we have seen how people behave when they have leaders like Evo Morales, even in the developed countries, you know, even in countries where education is much higher than in Bolivia, such as in the US, you know, people that follow Trump, they follow blindly what he says, you know. You've probably seen the statistics in the US right now. People that are on the right or Republicans think, what, 80% think people sustain that there has been fraud in the elections, you know? And this is basically because they believe this clown, you know, because he says so. Well, if that happens in the US, imagine the same thing happening in Bolivia, you know, where people are much less educated, and the people that support Evo Morales are the most uneducated people in Bolivia. So we're facing a similar situation as in the States with Trump, except that in Bolivia, you're dealing with people with much less education, and whatever he says, it's religion. So now, unless Evo Morales says there is COVID, take care of yourself, it doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what they think, because while they still believe Evo Morales in the discourse that there's no COVID, there's no COVID. And people are going to die because they don't follow the elementary rules like washing their hands, social distancing, and the mask. Because why should they wear a mask? 90% of the people are not using the mask in El Alto. It's because they believe in Morales, and they have been believing him ever since March of last year. So this is a tragedy, and we're going to see people die because of this religious belief on Evo's word. And this is a tremendously sad thing happening in the country.
Here's one for you. Talking about the vaccine for a minute. The other day, well, one of the things we touched on in the last couple programs is that initially the Arce administration talked about buying about 5 million doses of this Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine, right? There is a lot of criticism because of the lack of transparency, because the lack, not just in terms of cost of what they're paying for it, but also transparency on behalf of the laboratory that created it, in terms of its effectiveness, right? And or potential side effects, blah blah blah. And so, you know, Arce said, recently Arce said, I'm going to take the vaccine. I'm going to take the Russian vaccine. And Evo came out the other day and said, well, beside Arce, Carlos Mesa, the Cardinal, I don't remember his name, the bishop, and who was the other one? There was 3 guys he named.
Felipe Quispe.
Yeah. They all have to take the vaccine too. So what's he trying to achieve with that?
Good question. I think this is no. I think it's a wonderful question because I questioned myself the same thing last night because I couldn't reach a conclusion. I think it's a good question for a political analysis. Does Evo think that these guys are going to say yes? Of course, he doesn't think that, right? I don't think Carlos Mesa will say, okay, yes, I'm going to go. Have been inoculated after the president is inoculated. I don't think that will happen. I don't think Felipe Keep is going to say that because Felipe Keep. I don't know about the bishop, but the other two guys are just not going to abide by whatever it was saying. Why is he doing it? I don't know, but it's terrible that he does that because it's Evo the dictator, and I think that's the political, the main political thing that I can see here is Evo the dictator. He's still telling people what to do and what not to do, and he gives himself all these attributions, and he can tell anybody that, hey, you have to inoculate yourself because I say so. And this is a very terrible thing. But I think that basically, I don't know in this specific case, but Evo is a master in trying to politicize everything, everything. And he's just trying to push, I guess, people to fight over this whole thing because he wants for there to be a battle, a political battle, and for him to win the battle afterwards, he does that all the time, and again, he's a Trumpite on that. He wants to create a battle of every issue that is on the table and then win it, until he loses it because he lost it. That's why he's not president now. And that's why I have to admit it. I celebrate it because he opens battles every day, until finally he found the final battle where he lost and he's not president because of that. But he's still the king, In Bolivia, we don't have a president named Evo Morales, but we have a king, which is pretty similar to the situation in the UK. We do have a king here, and he's still ruling because whatever he says, the president complies with. So we should speak about this sometime in the program because the situation, and we are all getting used about this political system, but it's not a presidential system anymore. Because again, we have a king, we have somebody that governs Bolivia that is not Lucho. Lucho is still the guy in charge of the money, of the economy, probably with more power than before November of 2019. But he's still the technical guy, the political thrust, the political ideas, the policies in this country are basically elaborated by Evo. And he, like Trump, he goes to Twitter and he throws out all these ideas around, and that's what the government is doing. But I don't know why he said inoculation, but it's the king.
I tend to agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, it's also, when we've talked about this numerous times. I agree with you, but at the same time, I don't, because we've also come to the consensus that he doesn't wield the same power that he did before. I don't know if it's because legally he's not president. He's lost influence, at least inside his party. I mean, from a certain, let's say, from certain sectors of the the base groups or whatever you can call them of his party, he doesn't have the same influence and power that he has before. But I guess where I would have to agree with you is that at least in the top tiers, they're still obeying his his will. So, and I'm not sure why that is. I really wonder how necessary it is for, if Luis Arce were to rebel or be like a Lenny Moreno or something, and go against the Evo's wishes and rhetoric. How detrimental would that be? Good question. I wish we could find out. I don't know if we will.
I would imagine that Lucho Arce thinks about this possibility, but I think he just erases it from his mind because Evo Morales, I don't think is comparable with the former president of Ecuador, you know, whose last name doesn't come to my mind.
Correa, Correa, Rafael
Correa,
Correa. Uh-huh.
right. Correa, in my opinion, from what I know about equatorial politics, is that he was basically an important leader, a very charismatic leader, knowledgeable because he was a good economist, and he was a PhD in economics, you know. But basically, I think that he had as a characteristic, he was a rational leader, you know. He invoked people to follow him under rational arguments, you know, poverty, blah, 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 in his economic theories to overcome poverty. But this is not the case in Bolivia, and that's not the case of Evo, you know. Evo is a religion, you know. Evo is a set of beliefs that are beyond comprehension, beyond rationale, above rationale, and that's very dangerous. And I think that the people that followed Correa, I don't understand that they were blindly set by Correa.
I got you.
The people that are following Evo are just, forget it. You know that. You know, these people are just blind and deaf and dumb and everything, because they would do everything that Evo does. And if ever in time Lucho Arce decides to controvert Evo Morales in some policy, that's his day. You know, he would have his minutes counted in the presidency, because Evo would just go through it, you know, and with all these people. And you don't need millions, you know, which is very important, because again, the analogy is great, you know. Just think, Paul, in how many countries have you seen? Let's talk about the States, because it's really hard to talk about the world, but let's talk about the Americas. Where in the Americas have we seen in the last 20 or 30 years that Congresses have been invaded by mobs? I don't remember that. I just don't remember that, you know. And we live in a very controversial, politically speaking, about continent, you know, especially in South and Central America, you know, coup d'etats and whatever, you know. I don't recall people going in mobs into Congresses, you know. I do recall in Bolivia in 1969, there was a coup d'etat protagonized by the left wing of the armed forces. And but that was a coup, you know. The military of the left took power, and they got into Congress as the Popular Assembly, but it wasn't an overtaking like the mobs, you know. They just got into there, and they opened the door, and they say, okay, this is not a regular Congress, this is a Congress of the peoples, you know, like in the USSR. That was it, you know. But I don't recall anywhere in the Americas the mob taking Congress like it happened in the US a couple of days, well, more than a couple of days ago, a week ago. The point is that Evo Morales is a leader of that sort. You know, he's a leader of the beyond rationale element, and these people can do anything. And I don't think that Lucho Arce will ever dare to contradict him in policy, because that would be his end, and it would be a very tragic moment for Bolivia too. For the time being, I think it's just best for Lucho Arce to do what he's doing. He's basically administering the state technically, but under the big policies that are set by Evo Morales, because I think that's undeniable. The reason this is happening, I think, basically is, in my point of view, it's basically because it's fear. It's fear because he's still, this was my point. This is why I elaborate so much. You don't need millions of people to follow you in order for the rest of the people to be scared. And that's the point. All you need is probably more than a handful. In Bolivia, it's much more than a handful of people that are following him blindly. Because if you irate these people, this, I don't know, 1 million people or 500,000 people, if you get them mad, they will burn the country into ashes, you know. And my comparison with the US is that, you know, how many people in the US are willing to walk into Congress like the mob? Very few. Very few. You know, people are basically peaceful in the U.S. and basically law-abiding citizens. But all
Yeah.
you need is a handful of idiots that would do this, and they did it, and they got into Congress and they killed 5 people, and they were also killed, but they did it. You know, and you don't need a large number of people to do that. All you need is, it's like terrorism. You know, how many times have we all heard in the world that Muslims are peaceful people, that Muslims are not terrorists? Come on, you know, and it's true, you know, they are not. But all you need is for there to be a 1% of the Muslims to get engaged in terrorism, and they make the world tremble underneath, you know, because they are willing to do anything. So if all these white supremacists in the States start doing all this terrorist acts, people will be trembling too. And in Bolivia, it's much worse than that, because the number of people, the percentage of the people that follow blindly Evo Morales is very large. So yeah, that's the reason I think that people in the mass are very obedient to Evo. Basically, it's basically fear, I think, you know. And very sad to say it, but I think it's fear, and very.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's basically it. No, I think there's a lot of fear, and I think that we do not live under a democracy as we may believe we do. Why do I say that? Because you made a contradiction evident also. You know, in Bolivia, many people think that things are different, and they probably are to an extent. Yeah, I think that now we have a little bit more liberties than we had before November of 2019. During 14 years, we were under a very strong rule by Evo Morales. Now we're not, but it's sort of deceitful, because yes, there's more liberty. People can speak a little bit louder. Even masistas can rebel and say, hey, you know, this is not going to be my candidate in Santa Cruz. I want this other guy, and they finally make it, you know. Yeah. But it's like a father, you know. The father can be more lenient, and he can put the line through which kids will not surpass ever, you know. And that line can be drawn by the father whenever he wants, you know. He can be more lenient or less lenient. And we have a father right now that's more lenient. He just lets things go because he thinks that it should be that way. But the day he doesn't agree with something, he'll just go back to being very hard and tough and authoritarian. And I think that's the reason people basically obey him in the mass, you know. Yeah.
That's an interesting analogy. But I don't think, at least during, as long as Luis Arce lasts, I can't see him taking that same position. You know, I mean, in terms of being authoritarian, or I just don't see it. Thankfully, so far, you know, what I do see is the rhetoric in the attacking. And this is another question that I have, that I get that it's political, right? The constant attacks or criticisms of, and basically false, it's bullshit. He when he talks about the vaccine, he says that the Agnes administration did absolutely nothing, basically that they sat on their hands. And
yes, it's terrible. I can't hear that, but
I don't understand. I don't get it. You'd think people are tired. There are people, and I think I'm inside this group of people that want to give Arce a chance. I'm not masista. I don't really have any inclinations towards any party or agrupación or any of that. But I want to give the guy a chance, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I do feel refreshed. I'll take Luis Arce any day over Evo Morales.
Oh yeah, sure.
And so, do you think he earns himself any points politically by doing this? Because to me, it seems that he doesn't need to do that. He doesn't need to echarle flores or you know, praise Agnes for all these things she did to try and negotiate getting the vaccine to Bolivia whenever it's going to exist. So, but and I think it upsets people when they're being so blatantly and shamelessly lied to without any, you know, it really discourages me in terms of, and disappoints me. And so I try to give him the benefit and try to be supportive, and I don't trash the guy, but it's really hard to maintain that attitude when he does things like this. So you know, when during his, I think it was his speech that he made when he accepted the victory in the election, not his inauguration speech, no, that when he accepted the victory or recognized his victory in the elections, he said, "I'm going to govern for all people, and I'm going to be the unifying president," and blah blah blah. And what are you doing, man? You know, I mean, I don't think he's doing himself any favors. Or how do you see it? But by continuing with that rhetoric, it's not necessary. At least that's the way I look at it. The guy won with 55%. He doesn't need to.
He doesn't need to do that. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I don't think it's intelligent to do that. It's not smart, because I think he loses many people that previously, 2 months ago, would have even supported him, you know, say, hey, you know, Lucho is better than what we think. But he's not better than what we think, because every day he makes comments, so stupid comments against the previous government. Just, you know, he looks like Evo Morales, more like Evo every day, because he's just acting like Evo, you know. Why is he doing it? I don't know. I think he's making an error. I don't think he's looking at the polls. Maybe I'm sure they have polls. They probably do private polling in order to see how they're doing. But I don't know. The only thing that I would add to this is the following. If Evo Morales ever gets a chance to be president, and let's hope that he doesn't, he is going to be as authoritarian as he can be. Just think, you know, because I think that Evo looks at the big picture, and that's important in politicians, not only in politicians, in any person in the world, you know. If you look at the big picture, things can go better for you, because it's better to do that than just to look at the trees, right, that are in front of you. And Evo tends to be a very far-reaching, has a far-reaching view. And I think that in general, he gets inspired by, for example, China. You know, I think that that's more or less like his view of the world, what the Chinese have done with that country. And because there's capitalism in China, you know, and they make it work, you know, and it looks like capitalism. It is a capitalist society in a large extent. But then again, you know, politically, China is nothing, you know, because there is no democracy in China. And I think that's his inspiration. Believe it or not, I think that China is Evo Morales' inspiration, because even racially, I think he gets attuned with Chinese, with Asians, you know, because, you know, the whole theory about the American indigenous people coming from Asia and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, even I think there's a lot of that in the world, you know, especially in the Asia. When I have been, when I was in South Korea, some of the people in government in South Korea made comments in those directions, you know, and I was surprised, because I never thought about that too much, you know. But yes, Asians think about that. They think that the American Indians are basically Asian people, you know, and they consider them closer spiritually than the non-Asians in the Americas, you know. Very interesting. And yeah, this is, and I'm sure that this goes on in China also, you know, and I'm sure that Evo shares that, you know, and but away from the cultural and ethnic thing, you know.
How many Bolivians do you know that are Bolivian with no known Asian descendants whose nicknames are Chino? I know at least 2 or 3.
True, that's true. So I think that he's inspired by China a lot, and China is clearly an authoritarian regime. They haven't changed a bit, I think, the Chinese in their authoritarianism, and that's the way they're built. That's the way they had success in life. And I'm in the school of thought that societies are built that way. You know, if a society is successful, they try to preserve the system, because they think that that's such a good system, that because of the system,
what's not broke, don't try to fix it.
Yeah, and they don't try to fix it, you know. It's in China or in the States, it's the same thing, you know. How many times have I heard in the States the debate about changing the rules of election
The
and
electoral
making it
college.
more democratic, and let's have a president that's elected majority? No, 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 no. We have to keep this system, and there have to be the voter, the electoral college, and all that sort of stuff. It almost has no relevance and no consistency with democracy. But see, this was the recipe that made, I don't know if it was the recipe that made success in the US, but people think that, and they think if they're going to touch it a little bit, the system, it can collapse. So no, 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 let's just keep it like it is because it works. Same goes for the Chinese. The Chinese say, hey, we have become a prosperous society in the last 50 years, and it just works this way, and let's just keep it this way. So people tend to be that way everywhere in the world. Whenever they see success, don't touch the keys of the computer because the program can just collapse. So let it be that way, And Russians are the same, and look at Putin, if there's an authoritarian guy in this world, it's him, he just kills people. His adversaries are killed in London, he kills people in hospitals in London. And nobody does anything about that, The whole world just watches him and says, but he's a good partner. We can sell things to Russia, so the thing keeps going on, So I think that those are basically Evo's inspiration, are China and Russia. And I think that if he ever gets back to power in Bolivia, hold it, this is going to be the recipe, because I think he believes in that. I don't think that's the case of Lucho. I think Arce is more democratic. I think he sees the world on a different perspective. But again, he had personal success under Evo's under Evo's coverage. So he is obedient with Evo because he feels that that's the safe route to have in life. But I think that personally, like you think, I think that when he sits at night, he's not an Evoist, basically. I think he has a broader mind, a more democratic mind, and he probably admires or sees other societies that are not the Chinese or the Russian that we should follow suit. There are ways in which things can be done differently in Bolivia, and I think there's an ideological difference with Evo in those terms. But in the final count, he abides by Evo because he survives under Evo's protectorate all the time. Yeah,
it's an interesting analysis. I guess that it's an interesting question, if we can close on a question, to ask ourselves is, has Bolivia found that system? The Chinese, the Russians, the States, that's an intertwining of a political and economic and societal, I don't know, recipe that all comes together and just seems to work. And in Bolivia, I don't know if it has, because how many times has the constitution been changed? How stable historically have the different administrations and governments been? And that leads me to ask myself, if the 14 years we were under Evo Morales, if that's the system that works, or that's the system we want.
But let me expound, because I think this is a very interesting. Of course, Bolivia hasn't found it because it hasn't been successful, And I don't think Brazil has found it because it hasn't been successful. I think in general, Latin American societies had not found the system because they haven't been successful. So they go from left to right, and try to experience different recipes, and nothing works because poverty is there. The case in point that I always find so fascinating in this discussion, but it's my own discussion because during these times there's nobody to discuss with other than our program and between us. And I think this is a very important window to do it. The UK. The UK for me is the most fantastic society of the world, because what do they do with the Queen? And it's so stupid, to look at a country like the UK, which has had so many exemplary intellectuals, scientists, poets, philosophers, but if one of those philosophers becomes the first minister, he's going to go and kneel before before the sovereign, before the queen, and take her shit, you know, because that's basically what they do. They inform the queen every week of what they're going to do, and the queen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you tell me when.
No.
Go.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, basically, the whole point is that in the UK they don't really have a democracy. You know, not a well-established, not a democracy like in the US, for example. You know, they have a queen, and the queen decides many things, many important things are decided by her. The question is, why do they keep that? You know, are they a bunch of people, non-thinkers? No, that's a very intelligent society as a whole. Among the best schools in the world are in the UK, you know, but it's this belief, you know, which makes humans probably not so smart, you know, say, hey, this works, you know, it works. We must have a queen because she unites us, you know, and political parties are good and they can have all this fighting in within the system. But finally, if things get overboard, we have a mother that's going to put us all in order. So they go to the queen and say, hey, we're fighting because the conservatives, this and that, and the Tories, and I don't know what. And, you know, everything will fall into place because the queen will decide things in ultimate
final word.
situation. And it's not democratic, but it works. And the recipe did work, you know. It's an interesting thing, you know. I think that is a very interesting. I see that the pattern followed, you know, in societies that did experience success in life, you know, and in their lives. And whenever there's that, they just tend not to touch anything because it works. You know? Interesting, yeah. And that's why in Latin America things don't work because there's no success story. So as long as there's no success story, why are you supposed to respect the Constitution of 1826 or the Constitution of 1947? No, because we're changing the Constitution all the time. We're just trying to find the recipe of the best meal.
I think we've been through 16 different constitutions, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a lot.
Maybe what works best is for it not to work. Who knows? All right, Ernesto. Well, I think that's a good place to stop for now, and keep taking care. Everybody, please take care, and we will see you next week.
Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good week. And everybody that listens to us has a good week. And it's entertaining. It's always interesting to analyze this society and the whole world too. Thank you very much.
All right, take care.